What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Sport Vitamins. Today we have a special guest, Alan Stein. Good morning, Alan. Welcome on
Hey,
Sport Vitamins.
hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
I'm really excited to have you on today for multiple reasons. I've been following you for many, many years, and over the years, you've been always a great inspiration to me and also a mentor to me. So I'm really
Oh,
excited about this episode today.
well, I'm equally excited and I appreciate your kind words. We'll have a good conversation for sure.
Great. So let's start by giving our listeners a quick background.
Sure. So I'm 44 years old, a proud father of three. I live right outside of Washington, D.C., here in the United States, and I spent most of my career as a basketball performance coach. I fell in love with the game when I was probably 4 or 5 years old and played in high school, played in college, and then decided that I wanted to stay in basketball as a career and began as a strength and conditioning and performance coach. I specialized mostly at the youth and high school level, but had an opportunity to work with and observe some of the best NBA players of all time. And I did that for almost 20 years. And then just about 4 years ago, I decided to become a professional speaker. And now I work with businesses all over the world and share everything that I learned from the game of basketball through some really great players and really great coaches. And I show people in business how to apply those same strategies and mindset. So I'm still very involved in basketball, even though I don't do any training anymore. And it still monopolized most of my thoughts and most of what I speak about.
Okay, great. So as you said, you spent over 15 years coaching high-level basketball players, like just to name a few, like Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and of course Kobe Bryant. And which are the common traits of all these athletes?
The biggest one is they were all committed to mastering the basics and the fundamentals. And even once they had achieved a very high level, they're in the NBA, excuse me, they're the best players in the world at what they do. They stayed committed to working on the basic fundamentals every day, which, of course, in basketball is things like footwork, shooting mechanics. They never left the basics. And that was something that I've really tried to adopt in my own life, that anytime I want to get good at anything, whether it's speaking or writing, I make sure that I stick with those basics and those fundamentals. And it's really easy to get distracted and try to skip over those because many times the basics can get boring if you don't fall in love with the process. So I would say the very first thing is loving the basics and committing to the fundamentals. The second is those guys were all very coachable. They had a certain humility and they welcomed coaching. They wanted someone that could actually help them get better, point out the things that they weren't doing well, and teach them how to do things better. Because their only goal was to become the best players they could be. And they knew that they wouldn't be able to do that by themselves.
Okay, great. So sticking with the basics is huge, as you said. And how important is having a routine?
Oh, it's vital. I mean, ultimately, our success in anything, whether it's basketball or business, is predicated on what we do every single day. Anybody can be good for a day, good for a week. Some people can be good for a month or even a year. But the truly elite are the ones that have a routine and it's consistent and they do what they're supposed to do every single day. And, most people in most walks of life, uh, they do what's right when they feel like it. They do what's right when it's convenient. They do what's right, when they want to. But real high performers, they do what's right and they live up to their high standards every single day. And that all comes from consistency, comes from routine, comes from habits, any area of life. If you're talking about your own health and fitness, all you have to do is look at your habits. What are the things you do every day? What are the types of foods you eat? What are the type of workouts you do or workouts you don't do? All of those things are what determine your current fitness level.
And I'm really curious about your daily routine.
Well, I'm such a big believer in consistency. Excuse me. Um, yeah, I have a pretty distinct morning routine and an evening routine. I'm a big believer that what I call the bookends of your day, how you start every day, the first 60 minutes, and then how you end every day, the last 60 minutes, plays a vital role in not just your success, but your happiness and your fulfillment as well. So for me, little things like making my bed, doing a 10-minute guided meditation, doing some light stretching, reading or listening to something motivational, inspirational, or educational. I try to take really good care of my body. So, I make sure that I hydrate and get in my workouts. And then I've got distinct time where I like to get my work done. Now, I have a very sporadic schedule because I have kind of what I do when I'm at home, and then I have what I do when I'm on the road when I'm traveling to speak. And those things might be slightly different, but they're pretty consistent amongst themselves. So when I'm home, what I do most mornings is very similar. When I'm on the road, what I do most mornings is also very similar.
In order to stick to your routine, of course, you need to have a strong mindset, right? How important is having a strong mindset for an athlete?
I would say mindset is probably the most important thing. Now, certainly in sport, you need a certain level of athletic ability and coordination and so forth. But that stuff's only, you can only reach your maximum level of physical potential if you have a very strong mindset. And there's a few things that go under mindset. One, you have to have self-awareness. You have to know yourself and what things you do well and what things you don't do well. You certainly need to have some grit and some resilience and some stick-to-itiveness, so that you have the type of mindset that you're going to persevere when things get difficult and get challenging. You know that your workouts are going to be hard, but you do them anyway because you have that champion's mindset. And then the another piece, a huge piece, is the ability to be in the present moment and not get distracted by the past, not get worried about the future, but focus on what's important right now. So, if you're practicing on Tuesday because you have a game on Friday, you're not really focused on the game on Friday. You're just focused on being the best you can be that day in practice or during that one drill or during that one rep. So if you are self-aware, you have some grit, and you know how to stay in the present moment, those three things mixed together, that creates a champion's mindset.
And also part of being in the present moment is also the difference between hearing and listening, right? I have here your book.
Absolutely.
It's written here in your book too, right? Can you tell us something about it?
Well, I think the big thing is listening is a voluntary choice. Hearing is not voluntary. As long as you are able to hear, you'll hear any sound or distraction or anything that goes on. I mean, if a car horn goes off, you'll hear it. But it doesn't really mean you're paying attention to it. So listening means you're making a decision to invest your attention into that present moment and whatever that person might be saying or whatever it is that you're watching or listening to. Many people will kind of maybe put a podcast like this on and then they're folding laundry or they're doing something else. They're doing a bunch of other things and they're kind of hearing it, but they're not really paying focused attention to it. And that's a huge difference. So one of the best ways, especially from a coaching standpoint or an athletic standpoint, would tell players all the time that you actually listen with your eyes. We hear with our ears, but if a coach is speaking, you need to make eye contact with them and look at them, and that will increase your chance that you're in the present moment and you're actually listening to what they have to say.
I think this is even more important when it comes to like a youth athlete. For example, you started off with a youth athlete, and if they don't have a strong mindset, it's just a waste of time to work with them. They need to create good habits, and sometimes probably also it's more important than setting the right sets and reps with them.
Oh, absolutely. But it's up to us as adults and as coaches and as parents and as teachers to help mold that mindset in young players and teach them what that means. Show them and model with our own behavior. What does it mean to be prepared? What does it mean to be self-aware? What does grit actually mean? When you're running some sprints and you're getting really tired, do you quit or do you push through to the very end doing the best that you can? Teaching them how to be in the present moment. When kids, you can tell that they're distracted by something else or they're not listening with their eyes. It's really up to us as coaches and as adults to keep reinforcing and modeling that behavior so that they go from being youth athletes, then as they go on up to grade school and high school and university and maybe even professionally, we've already planted that seed with them very early.
Great. So if on one hand we want to be in the present moment, on the other hand, we also we need to have a vision, right?
Yes.
What does it mean to you?
Well, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I still believe that we should all be learning from the past. So we should be learning about the mistakes that we've made before. We should also be preparing for the future, and part of that is having vision, but we don't want to live in either one of those places. We want most of our attention to be in the present moment. But when we do make a mistake, perfect example, if you play a basketball game and the game doesn't go as well as you'd like, maybe you didn't play as well or the team didn't play as well, hopefully you're present during the game, but there's nothing wrong with going back and watching that film later. And then you're still present as you're watching that film of the past, but you're able to say, okay, here's something that we could have and should have done better. Same thing with preparing for the future. Using my previous example, today's practice is let's just say today is on Tuesday. Well, we need to make sure that we're prepared for the game on Friday. So there's going to be some things that we need to do. So we just wanted to clarify that it is important to be able to look back and learn and look forward and prepare. And yes, vision is basically, where do you want to be, or who do you want to become? And you want to get pretty good clarity on that. And vision is being able to see 1, 5, 10, 20 years down the line of who you want to become and what you want to achieve. But once you have that vision, then what's most important is coming up with the process and the micro steps to be able to get there. Perfect example. I have a very clear vision of who I want to be 20 years from now. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm 44 years old. So I have a very crystal vision of who I want to be when I'm 64. I want to be someone that is mentally, physically, and emotionally fit. I want to be someone that has very strong and deep connections with my children and my family and my friends. I want to be someone that is doing what I believe is very meaningful work that helps fill other people's buckets. So that's who I want to be. And now what I do is I focus every day making sure that I make decisions that take me closer to being that guy instead of the opposite of being that guy. And if I can focus every day on making decisions that are in alignment with becoming the man I want to become, then there's a very good chance that will happen. But it all starts with vision. I have to decide who it is that I want to be first, and then I can have behavior that aligns with that.
Okay. And setting a vision, creating a vision, and having a vision, of course, can have, in my opinion, also a few pitfalls. For example, one of them is confidence, because you should always keep confidence in balance, of course, because too much can make you look like like cocky, and too little can stop you from doing things. What do you think about confidence?
I agree, and I think words are so powerful. I mean, to me, confidence is a positive word. It's a great trait. It's something that we should all work to earn, because we want to feel good about ourselves, and we want to have put in the work during the unseen hours to believe that we deserve to be successful. You used another great word, which is cockiness, which that's when I think if confidence goes too far, now you become cocky or you become arrogant. And many times when that happens, a few things can happen. One, you become entitled. You believe that you just deserve success and you no longer work for it. Some people also become complacent. They just think they're so good at what they do that they don't have to keep putting in the work. So on one hand, confidence can absolutely go too far and you become cocky or arrogant. But at the same time, if your confidence is too low, then you don't believe you can do it. And if you don't believe you can do it, why should anyone else believe that you can do it? So, the best players in the world that I've worked with have that perfect balance. And I like the way you use that word. They're so confident that they've put in the work. They want the ball when the game's tied and there's 2 seconds left, because they have the confidence to know they deserve to make that shot. And that's where, if you live in that space of being confident because you've earned it, that's what high performers do.
How important is being confident when it comes to talking to other people?
I think confidence is important in every single area of our life. I mean, it's certainly important to performance, whether in basketball or in business. It's important to relationships. When you're talking to somebody else, you have to have the confidence and believe that what you're saying is important or is practical or is helpful or is going to be beneficial. I mean, if you don't believe what you're saying is important, then why should they believe what you're saying is important? And if you don't think it's important and they don't think it's important, then there's really no reason for them to listen to you. So if you have something of value to say, that should give you confidence.
This is a great piece of advice, for example, for a lot of young coaches when they talk to the players and they want the players to buy into their craft, and it's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's buy in and believe in starts with confidence. It starts with building trust and mutual respect. It starts with showing your players that you truly care about them. So now not only do they have a confidence in their ability, but they have a confidence in you as a coach. They have a confidence in your relationship. So confidence really permeates every area of our life.
And you just mentioned the unseen hours. This is a concept that I love. Like in sport, also in other careers, of course, there's a huge amount of unseen hours, and I think these are the most important part of everyone's life and everyone's job. Am I right?
Absolutely. Oh, without question. And I actually got the term from my good friend Drew Hanlon, who started Pure Sweat Basketball. He was the one that coined that term, and I've very respectfully stolen it from him, and I use it all of the time. Because they're really there in any area, whether you're talking about basketball or you're talking about business and sales or even talking about parenting or relationships. There are seen and unseen hours. And, I believe, especially here in the States, we put way too much onto the seen hours. We'll turn on an NBA game tonight and everybody will watch that game, and that's what's considered the seen hours. That's the performance. That's when everyone's watching and seeing everything that you're doing. But what people fail to realize is it's the unseen hours of preparation and working out and practice and eating right and stretching, doing all of those things during the unseen hours that allows those players to perform at such a high level when the lights do come on. And as you just said so perfectly, most of our hours are unseen, and I believe the most important hours are unseen. So we talked earlier about morning and evening routines. For the most part, those are unseen things. Yes, you might have a spouse that sees you or your kids that see you, but for the most part, the whole world doesn't watch you when you wake up and decide to make your bed and meditate and do some stretching and eat a healthy breakfast. And no one else is seeing that. You're the only one that sees that. But what they will see is the result of that. So whenever you go coach or whenever you have a speaking engagement or whenever you're going to be on a podcast, whenever you're going to do any of these things, that's when all of the little things during the unseen hours add up. And that's what will determine your performance. And, when we look in athletics, we'll use basketball, for example, most of the off season are unseen hours. Your teammates see them, your coaches see them, but all of the fans don't see those hours. And then you start the season and your practices and your film sessions and your weight room sessions. All of that is unseen to the public. And all they see is when the referee throws the ball up and the game starts. And it's very similar for me in speaking. All anyone sees is when I actually step on stage for 1 hour to give a keynote. They don't see all of the preparation and rehearsal and pre-event calls and everything that I do before that to make that hour the best that I'm capable of.
Yeah, and for example, in professional sports, this is something that if you're a coach, you're not impressed with because you know the amount of hours that your player put, and so you know that every achievement is less impressive because you know that the success just developed organically.
Yes, no, you know that is perfect, and you're right. And this is actually a compliment. When you see somebody like Steph Curry or Kevin Durant play at a really high level, most people who ignore the unseen hours, they just can't believe it. They think that's magical. Sometimes they think they're lucky, but that's not the case. If you actually knew how much work they put in during the unseen hours, it actually becomes less surprising that they're able to do that. It's, well, how did he hit that big shot? Well, he's taken that big shot thousands of times during the unseen hours. It becomes less impressive. When I get on stage and I feel like I deliver a really good performance, and I'm proud of that. Some people might be really in awe of that, but if they knew how much work I put into it before I stepped on stage, I don't think they'd be very impressed. They'd probably go, yeah, he should give a good keynote because he put a ton of time into it.
But also luck is part of the game anyway, because you also have to when the doors open, you need to make sure that you're ready to walk through it.
Always. Yeah, you have to be ready for every opportunity. And there's an old quote, and I don't know who said it first, but it was always one of my favorites, that it's better to be prepared for an opportunity that never arises than unprepared for one that does. And we'll keep using basketball as our example because I think it's such an easy visual for everyone, but it's the player that's the 10th man on the team that doesn't play very much, very rarely gets in a game. Well, they need to always be ready because you don't know when your number is going to get called. You might not have played the last 6 games, but this game, the 2 players that play in front of you are both in foul trouble and you have to play. You better be prepared. So it's better to be prepared and ready and not get in the game than to be unprepared when the coach puts you in the game.
You always have to be ready to seize the opportunity, of course.
Absolutely. Well said.
Okay, let's switch gears and let's talk about your new career. So you decided to transition your career from professional strength and conditioning to professional speaking. How did that happen?
I was starting to get burnt out on just the performance side of the training. Now, I enjoyed working with players. I've always been fascinated by fitness and athleticism, but it just wasn't as exciting to me as it had been years prior. So after about 15 years, instead of worrying about, or thinking about, sets and reps and exercises and training programs, that just didn't fascinate me near as much as things like leadership and performance and mindset and accountability and building culture. Those were the things that I was much more interested in. So for me, I just wanted to make sure that whatever I was doing, I was very passionate about and that I really enjoyed doing. So I just decided that I wanted to shift away from being on the court or in a weight room training. And I wanted to start talking about leadership and culture and improving performance through mindset. And at that same time, I decided I also wanted to shift my audience. So most of the players I was working with, were 15 to 20 years old. And I wanted to do something different. I wanted to work with peers, people my age. And instead of going in professional sports, I just decided to go to the business world and the corporate space. And as I said before, teach people in business how to utilize these same principles and strategies that elite athletes use and show them how they can apply that to becoming better business leaders and better managers and supervisors and CEOs and better teammates and colleagues and coworkers so that their business can continue to improve its performance.
There is a quote from the book Legacy that I like a lot, is when you're on top of your game, change your game.
Yes, I love that. So true. That's powerful.
So how important was being a strength coach in your transition?
Oh, it was vital. I mean, first of all, being a strength coach is what allowed me to stay in the game of basketball for so long. I mean, once college was over, I wasn't good enough to play professionally, so the only way that I could stay in the game of basketball would have been through coaching, and I really enjoyed the performance side. It taught me so much, not just about physical preparation and performance, but as we talked about, the mental and mindset side of performance. But it kept me in a game where I was able to learn from great players and learn from and be mentored by great coaches. And I was able to take all of that stuff and then be able to apply that to business. So without having grown up in the basketball space, I probably would not have learned many of these lessons and principles and strategies.
What are the biggest takeaways from working with high-level athletes that now you're using with entrepreneurs, for example?
Well, the biggest ones are the ones that we already covered. The biggest ones are how important mindset is. I tell folks in business all the time, figure out what are your basics and your fundamentals. If footwork is the most basic component of basketball, what is the most basic component of, let's say, sales? And then make sure you're practicing that. And there's other things. I mean, like when we look at a team, how important role clarity is, and making sure that if you're on a basketball team, every player on that team should know what their specific role is. They should know what position they play. They should know about how much they probably will play. They should know what's expected of them in practice. They should know what's a good shot for them to take. They should know all of that stuff, and everyone on the team should know that about each other. What's the same thing in business? You need to know what is it that the team needs from me for the team to be successful. And I got to figure out my lane in my role, and then I have to do everything in my power to embrace that role and star in that role so that the team can be successful.
Okay, success, of course, is one side of the coin, but the other side of the coin is failure.
Yes.
What do you think about failure? I mean, I think it's a great chance to learn.
Absolutely, and it should be, and it should not be something that we resist or fear. Failure is actually part of success. I don't even think they're separate. I think it's a building block to success, and it all just depends on how you look at it. I mean, technically, if your goal is to make a shot, you're shooting a jump shot, and you miss that shot, you failed at what you were trying to do. You were trying to make it, and you failed at it. But in that, any good basketball player doesn't even look at that as failure. They just look at that as, okay, I missed that shot. It felt like I didn't use my legs enough, so next time I'll use my legs more. Or maybe I didn't hold my follow through, so I'm going to learn from that. So it's these little minor things. Same thing. When the ball goes up for the jump ball, your goal is to win that game. And if you lose that game, technically that means you failed at what you tried to do. So how can you learn from that? So I think failure happens to be something that a lot of people get paralyzed by, a lot of people get really anxious and scared by, but it's just part of the process. Once again, I don't know who said it, but it was something along the lines of, failure is never permanent. It's only permanent if you allow it to keep you down. So we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fail at certain things every single day of our life. The question is, can you acknowledge it? Can you learn from it? Can you move past it? And then try and be better in the future. But failure is a huge portion of all of our lives, and therefore it's not something that should be resisted or something that we're fearful of.
And it also depends on how high your standards are, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
And most of our listeners, as I told you, are strength coaches. So what does it mean to set high standards when you are a coach?
Well, first and foremost, you should have very high standards for yourself, very high standards of excellence in every area of your life. And that's the only way that I believe it's fair for you to hold your players to those same high standards. It's for a strength coach, it's not fair to say that, to your players, you should all be on time and then you show up to the workout 3 minutes late. Of course, mistakes happen. I'm not saying anyone's perfect. But the standards you have for yourself will speak much louder than the standards that you tell other people that you have for them. So it's really important to have those high standards. And I believe as a coach, we should have them in all areas of our life, like not just in our coaching profession, but we should have very high standards for our professional development in the way that we learn. We should have very high standards for the relationships in our life, the way that we interact with others. We absolutely, as strength and conditioning professionals, should have very high standards to our own health and fitness and well-being. You tell a player how important it is for them to eat well, and you walk into the workout with some candy and a soda. That just doesn't send the right message or the right example. You're lowering your standard. And that's not to say that someone can't enjoy some soda and candy. Once again, it's not about being perfect, but it's about having really high standards. And this goes back to what you mentioned earlier about vision. You should have a vision of what you want for yourself as a coach. You should have a vision of what you want for your players. Then you should come up with standards and process and micro goals to be able to achieve that.
But also, in order to deliver the right message, communication must be huge for you.
Oh, communication is everything, especially in coaching. I think I could make a pretty compelling argument that you could be a very average coach as far as your knowledge of the body, your knowledge of movement, sets and reps. You could be very average there, but if you have exceptional communication skills, you'll probably do pretty well, as opposed to somebody that knows everything about strength and conditioning. They know everything about human anatomy and biology and physiology, but they don't communicate well. They cannot get their message across effectively. They can't motivate or inspire. They're not going to be as successful. So I always want professional strength and conditioning coaches and performance coaches to realize you should be working on your communication skills every bit as much as you work on your tactical skills and your technical skills. If the only books you're reading are on anatomy and physiology and movement, I think you're falling short. I think you should be reading books and listening to podcasts like this and doing stuff to improve communication and leadership, because those things will determine how well you'll be able to share the knowledge that you have from a technical standpoint.
And also another aspect is to be able to put your name on the map. I mean, you need to have people knowing you. Like networking is really, really important in the business world.
Absolutely. And that's one of the great things about social media. I mean, that's what's allowed somebody like you and I from all the way across the pond to be able to connect. Social media can be a great tool to learn if you're following the right people. It's a great place to share if you have something of value that other people would find helpful. And it's a great place, a great place to connect. And as you said, to network, to forge different relationships and learn from people and find mentors and mentor others and share information. I mean, ultimately, if we're all in the strength and conditioning field together, we should have the collective goal of making athletes better and making sport better. So we should all be sharing our ideas with each other. You know, I know that sometimes it can get a little cutthroat. You know, if you're trying to go for a job and other people are going for that same job, that you're more worried about yourself. And I understand that, but generally speaking, we should all be working together to help the sport and to help athletes. And if we do that, then we should want to network and we should want to share.
How do you make sure to improve your network?
Just constantly reach out. I mean, for me, I'm a big believer that you should always give first. So if you give first, just naturally things will come back to you. So my goal is always when I meet somebody is I'm thinking, who can I introduce them to? Who's somebody in my network that I can turn them on to, whether I introduce them personally or just say, you know, hey, have you ever read this book? It's a really good author. Or, hey, do you listen to this podcast? Because it's really good. I want to try to help other people expand their network. And then ultimately what happens is mine expands also, because then someone will want to reciprocate and they'll say, oh, Alan, thanks for suggesting that book. Let me suggest a book for you. And now I'm aware of a new author or a new podcast. So to me, it's all about being of service to others. And the best way you grow your network is to help other people grow their network.
You know, going back 4 years or 3 years now, thanks to one of your podcasts or interview, I had the chance to connect with Mike Hill from Georgetown University. Yeah, he was my guest for episode number 4 or 5, I guess.
Nice.
And thanks to you, actually.
Oh, my pleasure. Mike's great. He does a tremendous job. He's been phenomenal over at Georgetown. He's a really, really good guy. Well, that's nice to hear. I'm glad you guys connected.
Yeah. Alan, you also have your own podcast, right? Raise Your Game podcast. And
I do.
Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. So I wanted to come up with a podcast that was similar in premise to the book, which you've already kindly enough shared, Raise Your Game, and just something that would kind of continue that discussion. So everything on the Raise Your Game show is built around high performance, mindset, improving leadership. I mean, everything that we've talked about during this conversation, I try to bring to light in that podcast as well. So every season's a little bit different. We've had 2 seasons are out right now, and I'm starting to record the 3rd. So like you, I really enjoy doing podcasts. I think it's a great way to share messages. And if folks are willing to pay attention and to subscribe and tune in, I'm hoping it's something they find valuable. So they can just go to, you can go to raiseyourgamebook.com and find everything you want about the book, and the podcast information will be on there, as well as on my website, alansteinjr.com. Or you can just type in Raise Your Game Show with Alan Stein Jr. to wherever you listen to podcasts.
I also love the format that you're using, because in just 15, 20 minutes, you share so many nuggets, valuable nuggets. And that's not easy, right?
No, it's definitely not easy, but I wanted to do something that was on the shorter side. I listen to a lot of longer form podcasts, and I really enjoy them. I wanted to try to do something that was a little shorter, a little quick hitting, and might be a little bit different than some of the other shows that people listen to. But at the end of the day, whether a podcast is 5 minutes, 50 minutes, or 5 hours, as long as they're putting out helpful and practical information, then it's worth somebody's time to listen. And that's certainly what I hope. That's all the feedback I'd ever want, is for someone to say, I enjoy your show, but it helps me. It's like you just said, and I'm very grateful for that. It gave me some nuggets to think about and to apply to my own life.
Okay, great, Alan. So usually we'll finish up with 3 rapid fire questions, okay?
Perfect, I'm ready.
Okay, so the first one, an athlete or a professional you haven't worked with yet and you would like to work with?
Boy, I really like Giannis, that plays for the Milwaukee Bucks. He's somebody that I haven't met before, but seems like such a humble young man and has a great work ethic, and obviously is very, very, very talented.
Okay, pick one: strength and conditioning or professional speaking.
Oh boy, that's like asking me which of my children do I love the most. At present, I absolutely love the professional speaking, and this is exactly what I'm should be doing right now. But I will forever be grateful for the performance side and everything I did in basketball. So it's not that I like one better than the other. It's that one played its course in my life when I did it, and this is absolutely what I should be doing now.
Okay, next project.
Oh, well, I'm actually working on a follow-up book to raise your game. So, working right now to put a proposal together to submit to my publisher. And this book will be, it's a follow-up to raise your game. So once you feel like you're performing at a high level, this book will be focused on how do you stay at a high level, but most importantly, how do you stay at a high level without getting burnt out, without getting too stressed and overwhelmed, without feeling like you don't want to do it anymore. So for any professional performance coach listening, if you've been doing this for 10 to 15 years, that's probably something that you think about often is how do I stay in love with my craft and keep serving my players to the highest degree? So that next book will be focused on not only raising your game, but keeping it there.
Great, I look forward to it. So, Alan, if someone wants to follow you, what's your next move?
So they can go to my website at alansteinjr.com. They can also follow me at Alan Stein Jr. on any of the major social platforms. I love, like I said, social media to share, to engage, to network, to learn. And then I also mentioned raiseyourgamebook.com for anything on the book or podcast. So if anyone listening to this, if you want to drop me a line on social, I'd love to hear from you. And I really appreciate your time. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, and thanks again for hanging out with us today.
You got it. Have a great one.